Good morning from St. Bart's in Midtown Manhattan. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as the vicar here, and whether you're joining us here in person on Park Avenue or joining us online at stbarts.org, it's my joy and delight to welcome you to the forum, where each week we hold sacred conversations about the things that matter. And today we find ourselves on Children and Youth Sunday here at St. Bart's. We have a great youth preacher at our 9 and 11 a.m. services this Sunday. And we're also going to have a conversation here at the forum about children and youth and the role that faith can play in their lives. We're very excited to have the Reverend Robbie Pennoyer with us this morning, head of Grace Church School downtown, and it's feeling like a Yale Divinity School reunion up here this morning. So I'll hand it over to my fellow YDS alum and colleague, the Reverend Zach Nien.
Thanks, Peter. And it is my great delight this morning to be in conversation with the Reverend Robbie Pennoyer. Robbie and I walked into Yale Divinity School on the same day as Episcopal seminarians, and he has been such an inspiration to me ever since. Now ordained since returning to New York City from Yale, Robbie has served the Grace Church School first as assistant head of school, and since last year, 2022, head of school. His home altar is up the road at Church of the Heavenly Rest on the Upper East Side, where he attends with his wife, Polly, and their children, Victoria, James, and Cooper. So, Robbie, it's so good to be with you this morning.
It's a delight to be with you, Zach, and be with you all here at St. Bart's.
So, let's talk a little bit about Robbie to set the stage here. First, you were an educator, and then you decided to become a priest. And while in process to become a priest, you also became a parent. So here you are now, all three, priest, educator, parents. Tell us about your personal and vocational journey and how these different identities shape and form and inform one another.
Sure. I think from a very early age I knew that I wanted to live a life of service of some sort, but I think it was twin moments of hubris that maybe planted the seed of a call. I had amazing teachers growing up, just extraordinary, kind, thoughtful, dedicated, intelligent, quirky teachers who loved us. I had one teacher when I hit middle school who seemed out of sync with the rest. And I remember the dangerous thought of, I think I could probably do that better than she could. And that maybe was the seed of thinking, wait a second, like what would it be like to try to be on the other side of this? It was a unfounded thought. It turns out that what it is carrying on a lesson from the other side of the desk is a lot harder than I think my young 7th grade mind believed it to be. But that was one part. And then another thing happened where I had been growing up in a really wonderful faith community. Every child disappoints their parents at some point or another. My grave disappointment, for which I think I've been just about forgiven, was leaving the Presbyterian church to join the Episcopal church across the street. But one thing that happened was I began in middle school working at the St. James Friday night food program. And I think I began doing that because my school had sports after school on Thursdays, and so I didn't know that they probably had their own program too. But here, there was this Episcopal church that seemed to be walking the walk of faith in ways that I found incredibly exciting. What if I could do that? And so heading into high school, thinking about, do I want to be a teacher? Do I want to be a minister? Where's God calling me? Where's that spot where my interest, my deep gladness meets the world's deep hunger, to pilfer from Freddie Buechner? I think that was sort of the twin question until I got to college, and my college had a wonderful chaplain who said, you can do both. So why don't you give that a shot? And that's what I've been doing.
Wonderful. It's quite the hypostatic union.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think of, how can Christ be 100% human and divine? How can you be 100% teacher, educator, priest, parent? Here you are. And it reminds me of, in the scriptures, it seems like every time the people address Jesus as rabbi, they're getting ready to argue with him and try to trap him somehow. So I can see a little bit of that perhaps in 7th grade Robbie. But you've just taken over as head of school at Grace in the last year, coming off of a tumultuous season of pandemic, so much going on in the world. What would you say is the state of our young people and education in the wake of this pandemic? What are the challenges? What spiritual needs have emerged?
Oh, that's such an important and big question. I think that there are some things that aren't new, some things that are going to be eternal, that children require reminders, evidence of being loved, of a sort of love that's unconditional, of a sort of love that speaks to their dignity and worth even when they don't see it themselves. Spend enough time working with adolescents and you're going to have children who will come up to you having bombed a test that they thought they were going to do well on, and they will come telling themselves the story that they're worthless. We live in a city, in a society, in a world in which so much of one's sense of worth can be defined almost by proxy by one's success. And how can we, as adults who work with and love children, help them understand that we see and love a non-negotiable, non-contingent worth within them? That's not new. What's new are the ways in which that's harder for kids to hear or to see. I think that I'm one of those people who's pretty persuaded by a lot of the data that we're seeing around the negative impacts of social media and technology on students' self-conception. There seems to be a real clear breaking point in when folks get access to smartphones. I'm not a Luddite. I think there are amazing opportunities for technology and happy to prattle on about them. But that students get caught in a cycle of compare and despair, the carefully curated images of what they see their friends or social networks doing or how they're appearing to be in the world conflicts with the vulnerability that they themselves experience. So what's new are challenges. What's new are the ways in which we and our children are trying to sort out how to be the people they feel called to be in a world where they routinely feel perhaps less than or not enough, not successful enough, not smart enough, not happy enough, not pretty enough, not bold and brave enough in their advocacy for matters of justice. Anyway, it's hard. It's really hard to be a kid. I think it always has been. I think sometimes that grown-ups tell lies to children. We don't know. Sometimes we do it intentionally. There's no such thing as a stupid question as a lie that grown-ups tell children from time to time. But of course, like, what's the phone number for 911 is a stupid question. But you tell them that because you want to lower the bar for them to ask questions, to ask daring questions. And I think one of the lies that we tell, perhaps not by malice but by forgetfulness, is that these are your golden years. Like it's all downhill from here, which is not, at least was not true when I'm honest about my own experiences. Like there's turbulence that's going to be a constant presence. So let me turn the ramble into an answer, which is that I think that children need to know that they're loved, and they need to know we being a part of a church community or a school community, it's just absolutely vital for them to feel a deep and abiding sense of belonging. That is true because it's an ethical good. It's also true because that sense of belonging is necessary for the kind of academic success that we want our children to find. When students feel that sense of belonging, they're more likely to ask that question that they wouldn't otherwise. They're more likely to raise their hand and say, I think I disagree with you on that, because their sense of place in a community doesn't feel so contingent upon having the same answer, same belief, same idea.
I think that's a gospel we all need to hear. And so my follow-up question would be, how do you see all of this reflected in the state of parenting in New York City in 2023?
I alluded to sort of that adolescent social media compare and despair phenomena. I, as a parent, suffer from that too from time to time.
Competitive parenting.
Oh, yeah. And I'm losing. If it's a competition, I'm losing, or my children are. I think I wake up or stay up late at night thinking about how I wish I were doing more for my kids than perhaps I am. I wish I were more patient, more forgiving. I wish I was had my act together and greater executive functioning to plan more and do more for them. I sort of tell myself the story that surely all of my children's friends' parents have planned 3 field trips for this weekend. They're visiting 4 museums. They're on the Staten Island ferry, and they're going to get to 5 boroughs for cultural enrichment. And my children might be that morning listening to an episode of Bluey. And talk about compare and despair. There's this new television cartoon that wasn't there in my childhood called Bluey, about 4 dogs in a family. The dad in that show is the best dad I've ever seen. I mean, just amazing. And I don't quite match up. So what does that mean about parenting? I think that same message of grace that I want students to hear about your sense of being known and loved is non-contingent upon things that you've done. My school is called Grace. I love that. I love that it means that this word that has fallen out of contemporary vocabulary is something that we get to grapple with and wrestle with. Like, what does lowercase g, grace, mean for us? I always compare it to snow days. Snow days are beneficence that falls from heaven upon you, whether you've done your homework for the day or not. And so, as a parent, I appreciate I crave, I need, and I rejoice in those moments where I can experience grace. Grace from an absolution in the context of a church service, but the regular grace that I experience within my own relationships, where people are able to love me despite their awareness of my many faults. And I love that I can strip away, in such moments I find the awareness to strip away all of the stories that I'm telling myself about what I'm not doing. And I can focus on the 3 amazing, precious human beings before me, and with my wife and with our family and our larger community of support, love them. And the joy that emerges in those moments is the best I've known in my life.
So speaking of grace, your school, Grace Church School, has been in the news a lot recently, and some of our audience may have seen, various articles in the New York Times and
less so this year than before. I think this year we were in the Times once for I had the temerity to enforce a dress code. Anyway.
Grace abounds, indeed. So I'm sure we can make all kinds of puns about saving grace and amazing grace and all of that. But what has it been like to be a leader in this fraught time in the world, in which so many of our schools, churches, institutions of every kind are asking these hard questions about what does it mean to really seek equity and belonging and justice and honor all viewpoints and hold it all together? Tell us about just your experience and what it's been like, and you might want to set the stage for folks who don't know.
Sure. So, I sometimes feel like I'm the opposite of the rabbit's foot, the unlucky charm that came out. When I arrived at Grace, we had some turmoil. Some of it shared. Every school had to figure out, how do you get through COVID, and how do you transform a school that meets in person and takes advantage of the fact that learning is a contact sport where proximity matters, friction matters, and preserve what's magical and special about a school when you can only meet through a screen. And then we had tragedies unique to our community, and then we had some moments where our grappling with hard and challenging questions landed in the paper. Some of that was, much of that was for things that other schools and institutions were grappling with too. I think that in 2020, we heard from many, many alums of color that their experiences at the school were out of sync with how we understood them to be, that their own sense of belonging, their own sense of dignity and worth was not always nurtured and stewarded in the ways that we as a school had sought. And so grappling with that and grappling with how to lament past failures and to learn from them and to commit to doing better was important. At the same time, we also began hearing from members of our community that sometimes our zeal for doing better, our zeal for helping to address inequities in our community outpaced our thoughtfulness, and that we were making mistakes at times. And I think that those critiques were important for us to learn from, to listen to. And I'm really grateful that our school did not exactly follow the playbook that they tell you to do in independent schools. There are all sorts of unwritten etiquette rules in institutions like schools. One of them, for instance, is never tell a family that you're not positive a change you're making is going to work for their kids. Nobody wants to hear that the new math curriculum that you're doing has a 96% chance of being successful. And so round it up and just lead with confidence and iterate as need be. I think another one of those unwritten etiquette rules is avoid conflict at all cost. And I think that sometimes we have a tendency to shy away from putting ideas in conflict for fear that they're going to quickly become proxy for people, or that they'll inflame conflict within a community. And Grace did something, it was a privilege to be a part of this, that defies those sorts of unwritten rules. We put together a task force that was composed of individuals who were assembled not because they agreed on these matters of great social import, but specifically because they didn't. And we had a group of 14 people, and their backgrounds were a wonderful cross-section of New York City. Their experiences within the world of advocating for justice within the school, their experiences within the larger world. We had someone who was a retired police officer, someone who was Rudy Giuliani's old speechwriter. We had someone who had emigrated from China and was deeply aware of the profound dangers of political indoctrination and therefore committed to diversity of thought. We had people who had been great advocates for caring for the children of the school, and particularly the under-resourced. It was an amazing group. And for the first half hour that we were introducing each other on the Zoom screen, it was one of the most inspiring half hours of my time at Grace. The second half hour was trying to talk about anything of substance, and we exploded. But our task was to listen to the community, and for 3 or 4 months, that's what we did. We all gathered and heard from any alum, any parent, any student, any faculty member, staff member who wished to talk. And over time, what I saw was that our certainties slackened, and we found some extraordinary common ground of bedrock commitment to things like the dignity of every individual. Commitment that I would trace to the Episcopal identity of the school, and we can talk more about that. Things that seem to be in opposition, like I really want my child to feel that sense of belonging in this school, and I really want my child to learn math, turned out not to be so opposed to one another. And I think the school and then the board reaffirmed this work, left with a deeper sense of our calling as an institution to help students develop academic skills of excellence and habits of ethical virtue, and even more to understand that those aren't just twin goods. I was guilty of understanding schools to be a bit of a seesaw. Here's your academic program, here's your social stuff, here's your ethical imagination that you're hoping for students to get, brains, hearts. I think that we came to understand the school's identity better in the ways in which those are dependent upon one another for their fullest expression. The ways in which an ethical virtue like humility is not just something you care about for someone's character, but lacking humility, there will be a ceiling on how far you can excel in the classroom, that you will foreclose inquiry into a complex question, believing you've arrived at a satisfactory answer far too early. And then likewise, the work that we've done around community building and our ethical program is enhanced when we're bringing the same sort of intellectual vigor to it as we do to our academic work. So what does all that mean? It means that Grace has, I think, done some pretty hard work and sometimes pretty public work to sort out what does it mean to be an Episcopal school in this particular time. And I feel just profoundly grateful that the answers we've not stumbled upon, the answers that we have chiseled into our documents and into our mission, and the ways in which we have shared an understanding about what we wish to be and how we wish to be, feels more secure than ever. And that's I don't know, it's a humbling thing to lead a school that feels like it's moving in a direction that matters for the kids, because they matter.
It's beautiful. I'm so struck by this idea of learning and education being a contact sport and not being afraid, not avoiding conflict at all costs, but getting in the Zoom room and letting it blow up, or and the ways in which coming into relationship with one another invite us to let go of our certainties. It all sounds so Episcopal to me.
Yeah, there's a line, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. There's a line, because I should cite my sources. There's a line I stole from the prayer book, from that Collect for Richard Hooker, that became so valuable to us. Richard Hooker is the English theologian who's oftentimes credited with identifying the middle way for the Anglican Church. And in that collect, we in our work at Grace have talked a lot about the grace way. There's a beautiful line about seeking the middle way, or for us, seeking the grace way, not as a compromise for the sake of peace, but as comprehension for the sake of truth. And that has been such a helpful framework for us as a school to the hardest questions. This is Isaiah Berlin that I'm pilfering from now. The hardest decisions in life are not good versus evil, they're good versus good. And so as a school, the grace way, the way that we strive to make hard decisions and grapple with them in community, is not to say, yeah, these two things are good, but this one's better, so let's just focus on this. But rather, how can we design our approach in ways that pay attention to the goods for being good, and stick with them rather than seek to just rank or dismiss. So, anyway, sorry that right from the prayer book. So I think it's a useful resource for a school like ours.
Well, and I think for the world, and I guess one question would be, what is the wisdom, where's the learnings that we all can take kind of from this Episcopal model of education, even if we're not enrolled at Grace Church School or teachers at Grace Church School? What is the gift that Episcopal education offers to this increasingly pluralistic world? How can we maintain integrity of who we are, and particularly thinking of children and youth, growing up in this world with so much strife, so many options, all the things.
I think that beneath every school's mission statement is an implied understanding of what it means to be a human being, and what a human life is for, and what a good life is for. And so what does that mean? There might be schools whose missions seem to be pointed directly in academic excellence, understanding it to be the path that opens doors and sets students up for having the most options in life. Or there could be schools that center purpose and say, when students find their real sense of purpose, it's what will allow them to live the greatest and most fulfilling lives. And therefore, we understand something about the life as being about, in the first school, the realization of gifts, intellectual or otherwise, or here, the importance of vocation and finding a calling and meaning in life. I think that for us, from my understanding, and this is not different from being a school or being a church, implicit in some of our mission as an institution is a recognition of what it means to be a human being that feels maximal in its reverence for the preciousness of humanity. That we must begin from a place of understanding every child to be a sacred creature of God, created in God's image. And that's not language that we're an independent school where they're not going to. Most Episcopal schools aren't chock full of Episcopalians, and so it's important to find this language that is both true to our core identity, but also speaks to all in the community. But beginning from a place of every child who comes through our doors, every human being who does, and those who don't are people of precious worth. That then leads to all the programming, all the courses, all the structures we try to put in place to live that out. And that's the hard thing sometimes it's a hard thing to hold in mind. It can be hard when we're busy. It can be hard when the people we're trying to love are folks who seem less visibly concerned with loving in return. But I think that's what we're called to do, is just love kids and to see within them their full measure of preciousness, and to doubt that we can actually grasp it fully on this side of the grave. Yeah. So that's a mouthful of a way to say love them. We're called to love them and really love them for who they are and for who they can be, for who God sees them to be.
It's all sounding a lot like Jesus to me. Let the children come, love them. One phrase that I love that I've read in some of your communications to the school and other materials is this idea of deploying a pedagogy of joy.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does it look like?
Sure. Let me maybe begin with a confession that the pedagogy of joy has been something the school has talked about long before I got there. So this is a credit to my predecessors. And let me also say that it was something that I was a little skeptical of when I first arrived. I've undergone a thorough conversion. I'll get to my conversion story, I suppose. but I think at some level, I believed in a pedagogy of stress. No pain, no gain was something that really resonated with me at various times in my life. That I would work really, really hard, and if I could work a little harder, more would come. And at Grace, I've been persuaded on a whole host of levels. I've been persuaded at a neurological level that the learning sciences tell us that yes, stress can help you. The all-nighter that you pull, cramming for a test, can actually help you the next day. But if you want to really learn something beyond that next day, it's a terrible approach for actually learning something in the long term. That the chemicals that and adrenaline that your brains will produce to stay up and to cram that stuff will actually inhibit long-term memory. I think that's in part why we are gifted with fuzzy memories of what it's like to parent young children. That looking back on it, we may not remember exactly the pain of every sleepless night, and instead the delights. And there are many, many, many delights that outweigh the sleepless nights, of course. But so on one level, is an understanding about the learning science, that when students are motivated, when their learning is fueled by wonder, by delight, by curiosity, by desire to make the world a better place, that they will learn more, they will go farther than they otherwise would. And to be a school that is not just interested in helping students learn a lot, I think any school can try to do that. The curriculum should be a great tool for that. Like, if you're going to be here and here's what you're going to be assigned, here's what we're going to teach you, and we're going to help you get through it, and you're going to learn a lot. Like, most schools can do that. I think with Grace, we aspire to get kids to like who they are when they're working hard. And for that, it's about understanding what alights a student's interest or desire. I thought I was hired to be the assistant head of school, the director of studies. I thought that meant I was hired to help teach teachers how to teach better. And I thought I had a pretty good handle on how to do that work. You plan backwards. What do I want students to know as a result of our time together? How am I going to know whether they know it? How am I going to help them know it? And then you've got your unit. And my colleagues helped me understand the ways in which that was slightly insufficient. I'll give you a specific example where I used to teach a ninth grade. I still teach an irresponsible amount. As a head of school, if you're on a board of a head, you should tell all your heads not to teach, probably. That's the textbook way to run a school, is don't let the heads teach. They should be doing other things. But I love teaching. I teach every fourth grader a class on Bible stories. I teach an 11th and 12th grade poetry class. But I used to also teach a ninth grade world religion survey course. Evidently, it's a controversial statement in the world of education to believe that if you want to be an educated human being, you should know something about world religions. But it's something that we don't find terribly confusing or controversial at my school. And so we give a survey course of multiple religions, and the first unit was on Hinduism. And I did all that backwards planning. I thought I was ready to go, and then realized that there wasn't that concern for student interest, delight, wonder. And so I reframed and reordered and that opening class from, instead of here's this amazing text that we're going to read that it contains some of humanity's richest wisdom traditions, and instead began with sorts of questions that I've been asked in my time. Questions like, I'm a grown-up and my mother died 3 years ago and I've been living in a cloud of grief. Is it ever going to lift? Questions like, I worked hard in elementary school to get into the high school of my dreams, to get into the college of my dreams, to get into the job of my dreams, and now I'm finding that I'm 30 whatever and I've had all of the success that I've sought. Why doesn't my life feel more meaningful? And give these questions in the form of sort of letters to that I've made all totally anonymous and so forth to students of mine, and say, now we're going to dive into one of humanity's richest wisdom traditions. Now you're going to get to engage for a few weeks in Hinduism, and your assessment at the end is going to be to pick one of these questions and provide an answer using the resources of Hinduism to do so. And so if your answer is that there's an elephant-headed god named Ganesh to whom you can leave milk offerings in the temple, like that's not going to cut it. Like your response has to be something that would be meaningful and helpful. And I think that transforms the student's relationship to the material that we then study. That's the pedagogy of joy. There's not a student in the class who doesn't think, there's going to be some time in my life if I live long enough when someone I really care about is going to die. And I'm going to have to make sense of that. But there's not going to be a time in my life, there's not going to be a year in my life where I'm not finding moments where I have to discern the difference between success and purpose. And I may not have any affinity for this particular religious tradition or any experience within it, but there are many people who do. And for billions of people, this tradition has provided some guidance. Maybe I can learn from it. Maybe I can find something in it that'd be worthwhile for me too. So the pedagogy of joy is our shorthand for trying to make sure that we're not separating that concern for the content that we care deeply about teaching and the students that we are hoping to inspire to learn it.
I love that. Learning fueled by joy and wonder and curiosity rather than stress and punishment and guilt and achievement and all those things. We have a whole slew of teenagers preparing to lead the 11 o'clock service, so that's why they're not in here this morning. But every week at youth group, we have this lovely ritual that we call baggage drop. And we have a candle, and we have this magic flash paper that goes poof as soon as it touches the flame. And so we ask the youth, what do you want to let go of? What baggage do you want to drop at the beginning of every gathering? And, without fail, it's stress. It's the interpersonal conflict. It's, living up to all the expectations and all the things weighing on them. And I think they love coming to church because it's not school.
No, it's so important.
But it's got me thinking, maybe, okay, let's let go of the stress and then also ask, what makes you wonder and what gives you joy? So there's something to replace that. And
we can't get rid of the stress. And the things that we human beings find most stressful inevitably is change. And we will not look so physically different 4 years from now, most likely. I'll lose more of this and small changes here and there. But look at any 14-year-olds. Their time in high school is just one of profound change, and so we can't expunge that. And to some extent, there's a level of desirable difficulty that can be important to learn how to navigate. And yet what you said before, though, about the particular role that a community like this one can play in the lives of children, I want to just press on that a bit more. Because I do think that children benefit profoundly from having grown-ups in their lives who are not their teachers and not their parents who love them. And that I don't know that there are many institutions like a community like this one that exist for students to find intergenerational relationships like that. They may have existed before, but in this era where, and I just told you I'm guilty of this myself, of wanting to program my kids' time so compactly, where I feel guilty about the t-ball leagues that they're not in, that church is something different. And in order to come to this room, I walked through your children's chapel, and there's a space where you have these pews that are kid-sized. I mean, they're grown-ups can fit in them too, but what a beautiful thing to show, to signal to a community of children that this was a space that was built with you in mind. We talked
They
about
look a lot better than they feel.
Yeah.
They're not very comfortable.
we talked about youth service that's coming up, and I love that. I love that in church, from one week to the next, you can have a grown-up be the lector reading the lesson, and the next week it could be a child, and we're telling children, your voice matters here as much as anyone's. You matter here as much as anyone. It's amazing, and again, profoundly different from any other community, from any community that I know. It's extraordinary.
I do want to invite some questions from the audience. If you have them, please fill out the question cards, or if you're online, you can drop a comment in the chat box on YouTube or Facebook, or email my colleague Peter Thompson at stbarts.org. That's P. Thompson at stbarts.org. That's PTHOMPSON at STBARTS.org. And we'd be glad to get your questions to Robbie. But Robbie, I'm wondering, before we start taking questions, if we could just take off your proverbial collar for just a moment. And Robbie the dad, Robbie the head of school, at this prestigious New York independent school, Robbie, the spouse of Polly, brilliant lawyer. You guys are busy people. You have a lot going on. There's all the T-ball leagues, all the New York things happening. Help us make the case for church. Make the case for bringing our kids and grandkids and neighbors and children in our lives to this place. Even if it's an albeit imperfect regularity. Why? When there's so much going on and so much stress and demands.
So this is another one of those things I think you can make the case through many avenues. I would commend the work of Lisa Miller, who works up at Columbia, studying the impact of spiritual lives on adolescent and well-being. She's recently, I think, been engaged by the Pentagon, which I don't think of as being the most fuzzy, spiritual sort of institution. The reason that she has been is that the data that she has seen about the sorts of resilience that growing up with a spiritual, value-centered community provides one in life leads to outcomes that they see as being crucial for them to understand if they want to address the mental health of veterans who return from abroad. So there's fascinating, good data sets about the values-based communities of a church and the roles of such a community in shaping the habits, understandings, and livelihoods of the students and children who pass through them. I feel, just speaking personally, that church is a place where it's the one reliable moment of a week where I will have a brief patch of stillness. I work hard to make that, but when I come to church, I know that this is a community that is going to help me find a brief moment of silence, a brief moment of stillness, a brief moment to listen to God, a brief moment to sing together. And I am not, my antenna in terms of godly communications is not nearly so well honed as so many Christians that I admire and know and have grown up beside. That just because I have the silence and stillness doesn't mean that I'm walking away feeling like I'm all set now with God. I've got it all figured out. All my burdens are relieved and I'll be set for the week ahead. But that patch of stillness is a place in which I can hear a few things if I listen for them. I can hear that I'm not wrong in understanding my children to be precious. That is a message that all the liturgies, all of the hymns, all the prayers are affirming that my kids are the precious, blessing creatures that they feel to be. And I can give thanks for them. It's a time in which I can feel a sense of forgiveness that I crave because I deny it to myself. And it's a community where when the service is over, I can stay a little longer and have a cup of coffee. And very quickly, my children, and I think it's not because of the collar, very quickly my children have come to see their church as their home. They feel comfortable running up and down the aisles after church in ways that I'm sure your young people do here too. And that, again, is unusual, that this is a house of worship, it's a place for great reverence and where really important and serious things happen. And there's a time in which we can just celebrate and have a great time. And the kids get that really quickly. And they begin to feel like this is a place where they can be loved and known for who they are. Maybe that's even more powerful in reverse. They can be known for who they are and loved for who they are. And it's a place where if you are telling yourself the story of am I good enough, which is the story that I find myself falling prey to all the time, the way in which we try to be as a community, the way in which you, I'm sure, are as a community or aspire to be as a community, where our love for an individual is non-contingent upon have they been here the previous week, do they get here. I miss, my family misses so many of the family programmings that start at 9:30 at our church because at 9:30 we couldn't get those sneakers on. Just couldn't do it. We couldn't do it. And I arrive at church feeling this sense of guilt for not having gotten there, and the love and acceptance for who I am, for how I gotten there, for the fact that we're there at all is real. It's sincere. I don't catch people with their fingers crossed behind their back, and that's again rare in this world, and feels to me life-giving.
As much as sometimes I wish we were a school and we could take attendance and hand out grades for coming to Sunday school, to Sunday school at 9:30 or whatever. But no, I think that that's though the gift of having a captive audience, in Episcopal educational settings, to have the rhythm of just showing up for one another and kind of being formed. And so I think there's some questions that we have to ask about what does formation look like in the church moving forward in this period of kind of post-Christendom where folks might make it at 9:30 some weeks and might not.
And there's a reason I work in schools. I am too impatient. By November, I know the students in my class better than we could have imagined knowing each other. We know about who they wish to be. We know about some of the obstacles that get in their way. They say a lot about their families that we know to sort of take with a grain of salt. There's that old adage, I won't believe half the things you hear about me. I hear about you if you don't believe half the things I hear.
The best gossip hour is kids' church prayer time.
Yeah, sure.
Friends, what do we want to pray for today? And if you have family secrets, then maybe, don't send your kids to kids' church for
we
prayer.
do this every Wednesday. I have the privilege of leading early childhood chapel, and the students write their prayers. And a few weeks ago, it was beautiful. It's always gorgeous. The achingly sincere, dear God, please don't let anyone go without food this week. Dear God, may no one get sick. And then the children touches, most recently, dear God, please don't let people do what they did in the 1980s. Amen, I suppose. I wonder what's on the minds and hearts of our kids. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Robbie, can you talk about the role of independent schools in a 21st century educational landscape? As hard as schools like yours are working to be more just, equitable places, there are also voices who will say independent schools only perpetuate inequality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I grapple with that question too. And where I land is that every child deserves to have a superb education. Every child deserves to be a part of a community that knows them, that loves them, that challenges them, that inspires them. And we ought to be doing all that we can to help that be so. I think that independent schools can be private schools that serve a public purpose, that they have the opportunity to use the resources that they have to demonstrate ways of being. I hope for us, for instance, that we will make use of, we are still trying to do this, to make use of what we have learned from the past few years, whether it's about how to navigate COVID or difficult tensions within our community and conflict within our community, that can provide a model that all schools can learn from. We certainly benefit from our partners and thought partners in public, private, and independent schools. And then I would just point to the fact that there are so many independent schools that follow very, very different models from one another and the rich diversity within them. I think that some of those models include schools that have a bold commitment to access in ways that Grace aspires to. We're one of the leaders in terms of financial assistance in the city, with more of students receiving aid at a higher average grant and so forth, which is just which feels insufficient. I mean, I think the importance of diversity and socioeconomic diversity in shaping and enhancing the education that all of our students experience can't be understated. But I think what comes back to me again and again for how do we exist and why, is that understanding what it means to be a human being, and how can we love the kids who are entrusted to our care in ways that set a high standard, that feel countercultural in a world in which the value and worth of children can sometimes be ignored or elided. It's a chance for us to offer a model that we hope is compelling for the students and families attracted to the school, but also for others.
Can you talk a bit more about being a priest and an educator at the same time? Sure. This is an old model, but there used to be more of you, and you're a rarer thing these days.
Yeah, I certainly thought that my getting ordained was going to make it so that I would never be a head of school. I thought that was going to be an obstacle. I just assumed that it would read as most independent schools are like Grace, in that there are families that are there because of the Episcopal identity, but there are probably more that are there in spite of it. And this makes the Episcopal identity front and center. When I'm, Wednesday mornings when I'm leading early childhood chapel and walking through the school wearing a collar, I'm not hiding that I'm a priest. And so when I was hired to be the assistant head of school, I didn't have an answer to the question of why might a leader who is a priest benefit an institution that is an independent school. It's independent from the parish that founded us. And then we suffered a just tectonic tragedy in that my first year, my assistant, an amazing woman named Elizabeth Lee, was murdered in front of the school. And it was a horrendously sad thing. Just to say that puts it too lightly. And it was my first year at the school. And one of the things that I will say about Grace Church School is that it is a community that understands that when times are hard, we take good care of one another. That was the vision that got us through COVID, and it was what I learned in this moment, where the community's support of one another, of Elizabeth's family, was inspiring. And suddenly there was a role for a need for gathering together in a church. There was an opportunity to pray, not to provide answers of how could something as horrendously awful and evil as this take place, but to hold a space and to ask God to be with us in it. And I think that was one of a moment where I began to understand that every community can benefit from that training that we get in seminary, and from that understanding of God's faithfulness even in the hardest moments.
We have time for maybe one final quick question from Zach.
So Robbie, as a dad, a priest, an educator, I'm going to cheat and make it just twofold. What keeps you up at night? What inspires hope and joy?
What keeps me up at night are the fact that we have 800 students in our community, and so our community of about 2,000 people, and at any given moment, there are children who are experiencing one of the toughest months of their lives. And that's true for any human community of our size. And how can we as a school show up for those students, for those kids, for those families, And how can we not just show up responsively, but how can we do so proactively? How can we put things in place that will ultimately, how can we give students experiences, knowledge, lessons, understanding that can serve as ballast through turbulent times? So that's something that keeps me up at night. How can we love and serve our students better? And what gives me joy are the students themselves. I mean, it's just not a day goes by that I don't find a reason to just rejoice in the privilege of spending time in the company of young people. They are vibrant vessels of goodness, and to get to play and learn with and beside them all day is the greatest job in the world, as far as I can see it.
Amen. And on that note, please join us after the 11 o'clock service and get in the bounce house and have a bite to eat and go down the water slide if you like. We're going to have a big party for Children and Youth Sunday. But Robbie, your grace, your candor, your thoughtfulness, what a gift you are and have been to us today. And I just had a flashback of a sermon that you preached. I don't know if you remember, but back when we were in seminary, you told us, seminarians, that our job is to make Christianity credible, to make Jesus Christ credible in the way that we live our lives and contribute to a beloved community. And you are a living witness to making Christianity credible. So thank you for all the good work that you're doing down the road and the many ways that you're contributing to the life of our church and of our city. It's been an honor.
Delight to be here with you all. Thank you.
Thanks to Zach and Robbie, and thanks to you all for being here. We hope you'll join us for the 11 a.m. service. We'll be hearing from one of our own youth members, and I hope you'll be back next week. Zach will be with us again, and we'll be welcoming the filmmakers from a film called Wonderfully Made about LGBTQ plus Roman Catholics, and then we'll have that film will actually be screened later in the day next Sunday. So see you then.